The forest breathed softly beneath the fading light, its shadows stretching long across the uneven path. It was the kind of evening where the world felt caught between two times, one grounded in reality and another whispered about in old stories. A cool wind wound through the trees, carrying the familiar scent of pine and earth, but something else too, something older. Ilara paused at the edge of the woods with a woven basket on her arm. Her dark hair was tied loosely behind her, a few strands catching the orange glow of sunset. She scanned the ground for the herbs she needed, whispering their names under her breath as if greeting old friends. Her voice was calm, steady, shaped by years of knowing exactly what she was doing. She plucked a sprig of feverfew and held it up, turning it to catch the light. Most in the village barely remembered the uses of these plants anymore. They only remembered the stories. Stories that always pointed to the woods. Stories that warned children not to wander too far. Stories that made people watch Ilara with cautious eyes. A crunch of dry leaves broke the quiet. Jonas, a broad-shouldered farmer with worry lines etched deep across his face, was walking along the forest's edge. He froze when he saw her. For a moment, neither spoke. The basket in her hand, the herbs at her feet, it all fed the whispers he had been hearing in the village for weeks. "Ilara," he said finally, his voice low, uncertain. She gave a polite nod. "Evening, Jonas." He opened his mouth to say more, but hesitated. A sickness had swept through his livestock recently, and the weight of that misfortune hung on him like a damp coat. He wanted answers, something to blame, and as much as he knew it wasn't fair, he found himself studying Ilara with suspicion shaped more by fear than reason. "I don't mean to bother you," he muttered. "You're not," she replied gently, "just gathering remedies." Remedies. The word softened the air between them, but Jonas's eyes still lingered a second too long before he walked away. Ilara watched him go, feeling the familiar twist in her stomach. She knew the look he gave her. She had seen it before, sometimes subtle, sometimes sharper, always the same. It wasn't hatred. It wasn't even anger. It was fear, disguised as doubt. She took one last glance at the sunset before heading home. The village sat quietly beneath a blanket of dusk. Smoke rose from chimneys. Children's laughter echoed lightly from behind houses. Lanterns flickered to life one by one. Yet, as Ilara walked past, conversation slowed. A few people nodded politely, others whispered softly to one another when they thought she wasn't listening. Inside her cottage, she set her basket down and lit a small oil lamp. Warm light filled the room, revealing shelves lined with herbs, dried flowers, and small glass jars. She settled by the fire, grinding leaves with measured patience. Everything she did was ordinary, simple, human, rooted in knowledge passed down through generations. But in a world where people didn't understand what she knew, ordinary things could become strange. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. The door opened slightly, and a young girl peeked in. "Ilara, Mama says you might have something for her headaches." Ilara's expression softened. "Come in. I'll prepare something." Moments like these reminded her why she stayed, why she worked quietly, patiently, despite the whispers. Because not everyone feared her. Some needed her. Some trusted her. And those who trusted her always approached at night, when no one could see. Meanwhile, Jonas sat alone in his dimly lit kitchen, staring at the wooden table.
The fire crackled beside him, but it did nothing to ease the weight in his chest. His mind kept circling back to the fields, to the sudden illnesses in his animals, to the strange stillness he couldn't explain. And somewhere inside him, a quiet voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, the stories he heard about people like Ilara were true. He rubbed his temples. He didn't want to believe it, but fear often spoke louder than truth. The next morning, the village was wrapped in a thick fog. People moved through it like ghosts, their figures blurred and distant. A group gathered outside the well, their voices hushed, yet tense. Jonas approached and caught parts of their conversation, talk about strange herbs, odd behavior, lights seen in the woods. Every rumor grew more dramatic with each retelling. A woman clutched her shawl tight. "She was out there again last night. My husband swore he heard chanting." Another shook his head. "Saw shadows in the trees, unnatural." Jonas felt his stomach sink. He had been there. He saw nothing of the sort, but the stories were spreading faster than reason. Later that day, Ilara walked to the riverbank. Mist hovered over the water, turning everything around her into a dreamlike haze. She knelt and filled a clay jug, her reflection rippling softly. She didn't hear Jonas approach until he was only a few steps away. "Ilara," he said again, but this time his voice carried tension. "People are talking. They always talk. This time feels different." She paused, studying him. He looked tired, overwhelmed, caught between what he knew and what he feared. "What do you think, Jonas?" she asked quietly. "Do you believe what they say?" He swallowed hard. "I don't know what to believe." She stood slowly, holding the jug close. Fear can make anything look real, even things that never existed. Jonas didn't respond. The river flowed between them like a silent witness. That night, lanterns flickered in the village square, casting warm but unsteady light on the gathering crowd. The tension felt like a storm ready to break. Voices rose, rumors collided. People who had once greeted Ilara with kindness now avoided her gaze or watched her cottage from a distance. She stayed inside, grinding herbs with careful hands, pretending she couldn't hear the muffled conversations outside. But she felt the shift. She felt it the way animals feel the air change before a storm. In the midst of the growing unease, the moon climbed high over the fields, illuminating the village in silver. Jonas stood alone beside his barn, staring across the land. The night was quiet, except for the soft rustle of grass. He thought of Ilara, her steady hands, her calm voice, the knowledge she held, and he also thought of the fear spreading like wildfire. The truth hit him slowly, like a rising dawn. None of this was about magic. It was about fear. Fear looking for a face. Meanwhile, Ilara stepped outside her cottage and walked towards the woods, not to hide, but to breathe. The forest welcomed her like an old friend. She touched the rough bark of a tree, listening to the sounds of the night. Her life was simple, ordinary, human. Yet to those who didn't understand her world, her knowledge had become something else, something mysterious. The moonlight filtered through the branches, illuminating her face. For a moment, everything was peaceful. Back in the village, Jonas made a decision, a quiet one, a brave one. He walked through the square and stopped the rising tide of rumors with a steady voice. He didn't defend Ilara with grand speeches. He simply told the truth he had finally understood. She's not what you think. Those 4 words were enough to make people pause, enough to shift the evening's momentum, enough to remind the crowd that fear often creates its own monsters. The following days were quieter. The whispers softened, the tension eased, slowly but steadily. Life returned to its ordinary rhythm, lanterns lighting the streets, children running across fields, people working in their gardens. Ilara continued her healing work with the same quiet dedication. Jonas returned to his farm with a little more peace than before. Nothing dramatic changed,